Welcome back, everyone, to ResearchWorks podcast here at EACD and IAACD in Heidelberg 2025. And with me now, I have one of the keynote speakers that gave a very interesting talk just yesterday, and I can't wait to share this with you. Welcome, Professor Tobias Banaschewski. Did I say it correctly? I did.
Yes.
Okay,
thank you.
So wonderful to have you here. And your talk was incredibly thought-provoking. And you're obviously an expert in the area, ADHD. But there are a lot of areas that when you spoke about in your keynote, I thought it would be so great to speak with you directly about them. Because ADHD has gained a lot of attention of recent, which is fantastic. The awareness has increased. But there are also a lot of areas where there's a lot of inconsistencies or controversies with different schools of thought. I thought it'd be really wonderful to explore those with you. Do you mind going through with us what those, I guess, more controversial thoughts are?
I think the more controversial bits are or have been earlier, at the start of the century, should we or shouldn't we treat with stimulants, for example? Should we medicate or should we treat with non-pharmacological interventions? There, in the mid of the 2010s, there was a change. Meanwhile, it's worldwide very broadly accepted that pharmacological treatments in terms of stimulants are very effective but also safe, which is important. Now, another controversial issue is occurring now, and I raised this. Is it really helpful to get a diagnosis of ADHD or not? What about stigmatizing effects? There has been a lot of work against stigma of diagnosis, but now somehow this changed also into another direction with the upcoming neurodiversity movement. People now, as you can see in the internet, there are many people who self-identify as having ADHD, and this is not always very safe to do it by oneself, just by a questionnaire picked up in the internet. And ironically, some people also seem to be very happy to self-identify with or that a mental disorder become an identity. It's something that I regard as, let's say, a double-edged sword. You may say, "Oh, I'm very positive, I'm very creative, very innovative, very." Divergent thinking, and this is all positive, and these are the positive aspects of my ADHD. This, on the one hand, this perspective, on the one hand, helps to fight stigma. But on the and strengthens the positive aspects.
That's right.
But it has also the potential downside to reduce persons to the diagnostic categories.
That's right.
And people can do it by themselves. But if you are your identity is not one identity that we have. Identity is not something that is pre-given. Identity is not by birth or by. It's not. Causally determined by the color of your skin, your passport, or whether you're male or female. Identity is something that we as humans construct, and there is no true identity or false identity. It's just a continuous process whereby we as individuals interpret ourselves in the context of society. But as you can compare it, if you read a novel, there is not the one correct reading. There are just different lines of interpretation of a novel.
That's right.
And in this way, I think we should be put much more emphasis on what I would call agency, self-determination, And this brings us back to another controversy. This is the controversy about are we just nature and natural beings, or to what degree can we as humans also conceive ourselves as being able to develop reason?
Yeah.
We are not just reasonable people, of course, but reason and autonomy are characteristics that we are in principle able to develop.
Yeah.
And as we have seen also by the two other keynote presentations, and particularly by the presentation of and talks of the people who had severe handicaps at birth, but nevertheless made their way, does clearly indicate to me, at least, that people can grow over the barriers.
Yeah.
And in this conference, we should put really the emphasis on how we can develop and grow, and despite that we are all humans and make failures and have handicaps, but to grow from where you are and not to be take this normative perspective is very important to me. And this is another aspect which is also relevant to within the ADHD field. But sorry, there are also other controversies, and I stop here in order to give you the possibility to
oh no!
Interview me.
What you have said, I'm so glad you shared that with everyone, because you're absolutely right. It is a challenging field, but an exciting field all at the same time. Awareness has finally happened.
Yeah.
And it is validating for people who have experienced this all their life. We hear so much more of adults now going to seek a formal diagnosis, having medication, changing their life, able to work and engage, keep relationships. Those are so vital. On the other hand, you have the self-diagnostic procedure, which almost for the people who do have a formalized diagnosis of ADHD can be very difficult in terms of their experience. But regardless, everyone is human, and there's capacity for change and growth regardless of a diagnosis.
Absolutely, and that's a key. That's a key point, I think, that you just mentioned, which I fully share your opinion on this. And this also brings us to another facet of my talk, or the whole discussion, which is not just relevant in terms of ADHD, but probably relevant to most or even all mental disorders. Mental disorders are not the same like somatic disorders. If you have a somatic disorder, you can describe it in terms of etiology and effects, possibly in a causally determined framework. You have genes, you have environmental factors, the interaction that then cause certain developments, and you can describe it as a naturalistic process.
Yeah.
But and you can this may be on the biological level, it may be on the psychological level. You could even say, there is certain societal factors which then, so to speak, act to a certain degree causal.
Yeah.
But humans are not just natural entities. We as humans are also what Kant, the philosopher Kant, already elaborated 300 years ago. We have our mind, and we have a mind, and the mind enables us to think. And while we need an so let's say our brain is a prerequisite for thinking, but what we think and how we think, so the specific content is not determined. We can self-determine. You know, it's if you reduce mind towards nature, then you miss a point. And because mind, even if you have a disturbed mind, then it's still a mind and it's still a person and it's not just a brain.
That's right.
So we should not reduce our understanding of mental disorders just as brain processes.
Sure.
We need to take an interdisciplinary approach, combining natural sciences like biology, etc., with human sciences. So the humanities are very important to get more a more detailed understanding of mental disorders and also how we can develop agency. So because agency is so crucial, and I saw this in many talks.
It's been central stream with a lot of the talks, hasn't it?
Exactly. And so this is really, this conference here is at the edge of the, for me at least, of certain discussions that we are also see in the field of psychiatry and child psychiatry.
I love your perspective. It's about the human. It's human rights.
Yes.
And I hear that all through what you're saying. And I can only think of people I know in my world who have a formal diagnosis of ADHD, and all they want is to be able to live the fullest life and quality of life.
Yeah.
But it does come down to a desire and the need to want to be part of that, to seek out that support,
exactly,
seek out opportunities and that agency, as you said.
Yes, and this is really also a merit of the neurodiversity movement to bring this into our awareness. However, I see also a potential downside of the neurodiversity or risk, let's put it so, risk of the neurodiversity movement. It's basically twofold. One, we still need medical help for certain severe conditions. We should not just say we are all different, but people who have handicaps should receive help, but it's not either help or agency. But if you put it's both, and we need a combination. And the second point is why neurodiversity? We are diverse to a certain degree, but it's not just because our brain is diverse. It's we are diverse because of many aspects, and our identity is not our brain. We are much more. It's the
downfall of that word, isn't it? Neurodiversity.
Exactly. It's the
put it into a bucket.
It may create the illusion that it's just because of a causal process stemming from our brain, which creates.
It's so contextual,
but we in fact are the ones who also develop and shape our identities and our future identities by our struggles, how we think about our experience, how we reflect upon ourselves, and so on. And this is important to stress. And there is another element that, or another important point to consider. And the other point to consider is the following. We as individuals are always part of a society. So there are barriers in society. If you follow this U.S. illusion, like everyone can become a billionaire, and you look into the low-income countries, then this is ironic sarcasm and nothing else. It's not. You can struggle and you may fail, and it may not be your fault. But of course, the only chance you have as an individual, as said yesterday by the person who talked about his experience, is to stand up again and try again. But it doesn't tell you anything about yours. your dignity or self, the worth. We are all human beings.
Yes.
There are universal principles that also bring us together. We are diverse, but in a certain way, we are all humans, and we should not be segregate ourselves into
buckets almost.
buckets of in terms of color of the skin or in terms of our culture and blah 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 blah. These are all nice aspects, but we need to stress what does also combine us all, what brings us together.
Yeah.
And this is really the universal human values.
Right.
And these human values cannot be reduced to, so universalism cannot be reduced to, let's say, white, Western, male culture. It's much broader, and it has to do something with the mind, and that's what I think is very important. And it's not just my own line of thinking, but I agree with many others who think that way.
I'm grateful that you've shared this, because it's not every day. I think you're the first psychiatrist we've had on the podcast.
Okay. Oh,
you are. So you're the first, and I think it is wonderful to contextualize this with something that we see all the time at the moment. And because ADHD is everywhere, and almost to the point where people will say it's been overdiagnosed, and there is a role here to play from a self-diagnostic perspective.
Yeah, but then now with as you mentioned this aspect of overdiagnosis, the question is, what do we mean by overdiagnosis? Because if we see ADHD as a natural entity, we could say, if there are more administrative diagnoses than there are cases. But it's not as easy as this. Why? Because ADHD or the prevalence of ADHD also depends upon how where we set the boundaries. It's like blood pressure. For in a certain way, where is the boundary? And my definition of overdiagnosis would be if the effect of receiving a diagnosis for an individual is worse then if it turns out that that those people who we diagnose do not benefit from receiving a diagnosis, then we overdiagnose. Meaning, if you have very low symptoms, you could and you may have less chance to benefit from treatment because there's nothing to improve really. But then if you receive a diagnosis, it may still have negative effects. And this, in fact, has been shown by recent studies that receiving a diagnosis could also have an impact on your ability to or onto your motivation, how to develop and grow. And like there was in a Norwegian study a higher rate of school dropouts if you have a very liberal definition of ADHD in comparison to a somewhat more restricted definition of ADHD. So these are all issues that we need to study empirically, and then we can develop criteria where we say, here these are the boundaries of the diagnostic category. But there is not. Nature doesn't tell us where we should cut the where we should put the line. It's a cultural decision, and the decision, if it's a reasonable decision, should be based upon whether it helps the people or not.
Beautiful, perfect place to finish. Thank you so much, Tobias. That was insightful.
Thank you.
And I think answers a lot of questions that we have. And thank you for enlightening us with that and bringing this topic to the forefront.
I thank you for giving me the opportunity to elaborate this
It was
further.
wonderful,
Thank
absolutely
you.
wonderful. To all of our listeners, hope you really enjoyed that. A great follow-on from the keynote, actually. But we look forward to speaking to you all again really soon. But stay tuned for so much more. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.